My daughter texted me 3 words that I still can't forget. "Dad, stay away." I stared at that message for nearly a minute, wondering why Emily would send it so suddenly. Then she called, whispered, "Please don't come here," and hung up. I should have listened, but I was her father. Something in her voice told me she wasn't warning me for my safety. She was warning me because she was afraid. So I drove to her house. When I arrived, the lights were blazing upstairs and I could hear laughter. But Emily was nowhere to be seen. I searched the house until I heard a faint knocking beneath the floor. I opened the basement door and found my daughter locked inside, bruised and terrified. Upstairs, her husband's family was eating dinner like nothing was wrong. The pictures shown in this video are imaginative recreations made to represent the story, not real photographs of the people or events. If you enjoy emotional family stories, hidden secrets, and powerful justice, subscribe to Behind Dad and stay with me, because what I discovered that night changed my family forever. My name is Robert, and Emily was my only daughter. She had always been strong, independent, and stubborn in the best possible way. After her mother passed away, Emily became my closest friend. She married Jason 2 years ago, and I tried to welcome his family even though something about them never felt right. Jason's parents, Richard and Linda, were wealthy and controlling. They always talked about money, property, and appearances. Whenever I visited, they treated Emily like she was lucky to be part of their family. I didn't like it. But Emily always told me, "Dad, I'm fine." That night I realized she had been lying. When I found her in the basement, she could barely stand. Her wrists were red from the rope that had been tied around them. I dropped to my knees beside her. "Emily, who did this?" She started crying. "Dad, you have to leave before they know you're here." I told her I wasn't going anywhere. Then she grabbed my shirt and whispered something that made my blood run cold. "They're not just trying to hurt me." I looked at her. "What do you mean?" She pointed toward the ceiling. "They're waiting for you to die." I felt a chill run through me when Emily said those words. "They're waiting for you to die." For a second, I couldn't speak. I helped her sit against the wall and asked what she meant. She told me Jason's family had been pressuring her for months to convince me to sell my property. They knew I had savings, land, and a house that had been in my family for decades. Emily had refused to help them, and that's when everything changed. Jason became angry. His parents started threatening her. They told her that if she didn't cooperate, they would destroy her reputation and make sure she lost everything. Then 3 nights earlier, Jason locked her in the basement. I wanted to call the police immediately, but Emily grabbed my hand. "Dad, wait." She told me they had cameras throughout the house. If they saw me calling for help, Jason would know we had found evidence. I asked what evidence. Emily pointed toward a small metal box hidden beneath an old blanket. Inside were photographs, bank statements, copies of legal documents, and several handwritten notes. I opened one. It showed Jason had been secretly moving money from Emily's accounts into an account controlled by his parents. I felt my anger rising. Then I found something even worse. There was a copy of my own property records. Someone had already prepared documents to transfer my house. My name was typed at the bottom. I had never signed them. Emily started crying again. "Dad, that's why they wanted me to convince you to come here for Christmas." I stared at her. "They plan to take my house," she nodded. But then we heard footsteps above us. Someone was walking toward the basement. Emily whispered, "Dad, hide." I moved behind a storage shelf just before the door opened. Jason stepped inside. He looked around. Then he smiled. "Emily," he said calmly, "your father isn't coming, is he?" She didn't answer. Jason walked closer. "I really hope he doesn't." Then he pulled out his phone. "He has no idea what we're about to do." I held my breath. Jason suddenly received a message. He looked at the screen. His face changed. He whispered, "Someone told him." Then he ran upstairs. I looked at Emily. Neither of us understood, until I saw the message he had left open. It contained one sentence. "Robert KNOWS everything." I stepped out from behind the shelf, and Emily nearly screamed. I put my finger to my lips and whispered that we had to move quickly. Jason had already run upstairs, and whatever message he received meant someone else knew I was there. I called 911 quietly, gave them our address, and told them my daughter was injured and being held inside the house. Then Emily pointed toward a narrow storage door behind the furnace. "Dad, there's another way out." We crawled through the dusty passage and reached the garage. I helped Emily into my car, but before I could start the engine, we heard shouting inside. Richard and Jason had discovered the basement was empty. Then the garage door suddenly opened. I froze. Linda stood there, but she wasn't angry. She was crying. "Robert, don't drive away," she whispered. "You need to hear me." I told her to stay away from my daughter. She shook her head. I didn't know they would hurt her. Then she handed me a small flash drive. Your daughter found this in Jason's office. I copied it before he knew. I looked at Emily. She nodded. We drove to a safe place and opened the files. The first recording showed Jason, Richard, and another man discussing my property. They planned to force Emily into convincing me to sign the transfer documents. Then the second recording appeared. My heart stopped. It was Richard talking about my late wife. He said she had discovered their plan years earlier. That was why they had tried to isolate Emily from me. But the final recording was the one that changed everything. Jason admitted he had staged Emily's injuries and planned to blame everything on an unknown intruder if the police arrived. I felt sick. My daughter looked at me and whispered, "Dad, I thought nobody would believe me." I held her hand. "I believe you." Then police arrived. Richard and Jason were arrested after officers searched the house and found the forged documents, cameras, ropes, and financial records. But there was still one question. Who had sent Jason the message saying I knew everything? Linda finally answered. It was me. She had secretly contacted a lawyer after realizing what her husband and son were planning. She had been gathering evidence for months, but was too afraid to confront them. The lawyer had advised her to send the message the moment she knew I had arrived. Linda looked at Emily and cried. I should have protected you sooner. Emily didn't answer. She simply walked away. For the first time that night, I saw relief in her eyes, but the biggest shock was still waiting for us. The lawyer opened one final file. It contained a document my wife had prepared years earlier, and it named exactly who would inherit everything if anyone ever tried to steal my property. The name wasn't mine. It was Emily's. I stared at the document for several seconds. Emily's name was written clearly across the page. My late wife had transferred the family property into a protected trust years before any of this happened. Emily could not be forced to sell it, and neither Jason nor his parents could legally claim a single dollar. I felt tears in my eyes. My wife had seen something coming long before I did. The lawyer explained that Susan had also left instructions that if anyone ever tried to manipulate Emily or take control of the property, the evidence should be released immediately. That evidence included the recordings, financial records, and copies of the forged documents. Jason's entire plan collapsed within days. He had believed money made him powerful. His parents believed their connections would protect them. But they had forgotten one thing: truth leaves a trail. The police investigation uncovered years of financial fraud. Richard and Linda had been using family members' accounts to hide money and pressure vulnerable relatives into signing property documents. Jason had helped them because he wanted control of my house. Emily eventually filed for divorce. It was painful watching her go through it, but I stayed beside her every step. One evening, months later, we sat together on my porch. Emily looked at me and said, "Dad, I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner." I told her she didn't need to apologize for being afraid. "But promise me one thing," I said. "What? Never let fear convince you that you have to suffer alone." She nodded and hugged me. That moment meant more to me than any property or money ever could. I still think about that night sometimes. I remember opening that basement door and seeing my daughter sitting there bruised and terrified. I remember the laughter upstairs, and I remember the anger I felt. But I also remember choosing not to become cruel like the people who hurt her. My revenge wasn't destroying them. My revenge was making sure they could never control my daughter again. The family house remained ours, but Emily eventually decided to move somewhere new. She said she wanted a fresh start. I understood. The old house had too many painful memories. Before she left, she stood in the doorway and looked back at me. "Dad," she said, "Mom saved us." I smiled. She did. Then I realized something Susan had understood before any of us. A family isn't protected by money, property, or a perfect image. It's protected by people who are willing to stand beside each other when everything falls apart. If you've ever had to protect someone you love, tell me in the comments what you would have done in my place. And if this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to hear that they should never suffer in silence. Remember this lesson: never mistake silence for peace, and never let fear keep you from asking for help. Sometimes the strongest revenge isn't hurting the people who betrayed you. It's saving the person they tried to break. And if you're a father, remember this: when your child calls for help, listen to the fear behind their words. Because sometimes one brave decision can save an entire life.